We will look at a recording recorded from Noelle Jacobsen. She will present a new project that's already been mentioned, so improving the independent component analysis algorithm by training it on the mobile EEG data.
Hello everyone! My name is Noelle Jacobsen and I am a PhD candidate in Dr. Dan Ferris's Human Neuromechanics Lab at the University of Florida. And today I'm excited to share with you our project IC MoBI, which is a MoBI extension to IC Label. I'm sure many of you are familiar with IC Label, but for those who haven't, IC Label is an independent component classifier available as a plugin in EEG Lab. It automatically classifies components and provides the probabilities of an independent component being in any of the 7 categories listed in IC Label: brain, muscle, eye, heart, line noise, channel noise, or other. IC Label is a really great tool that aims to reduce time and bias in EEG data analyses by providing a more objective way of analyzing components. However, it does have some limitations, particularly with regard to mobile EEG data. For example, here we have a component from a MoBI experiment that seems to be a mixture of brain and muscle activity. If we take a look at the power spectral density in the bottom right-hand corner, where we have the frequency on the x-axis and log power on the y-axis, we see a 10 Hz peak, which is a common brain feature. But we also see a lot of features that are characteristic of muscle activity, such as high broadband power above 20 Hz, a superficial dipole location in the back of the head, and bursts of high-frequency activity in the time series data. However, IC Label classifies this component as a majority brain component, with 65% brain and less than 30% chance being muscle. I was seeing quite a few of these misclassified components in my data, especially for components toward the back of the head, where we see a lot of neck muscle activity. So as you can see, we might not always agree with the labels that IC Label provides us. And this brings us to one of the major drawbacks with IC Label, which is that it was trained primarily with stationary EEG data, which does not fully represent the data content of mobile EEG studies. In MoBI data, we have a lot more neck muscle activity, muscle activity in general, and movement-related artifact. And in machine learning, your model is only as good as the data that it's trained on. So we thought that training a component classifier with mobile EEG data may lead to better model performance in classifying ICs from mobile recordings. So we are developing a new machine learning model using MoBI data. Our goal is to improve classification of ICs from MoBI data and enhance reproducibility. We are also hoping to reduce researcher subjectivity and time spent sifting through ICs. MoBI data is already challenging enough to process, and we don't want IC classification to be an additional time burden. We are collecting MoBI data from various labs and institutions who are using different processing pipelines, equipment, and experimental paradigms. This variability will make our classifier more robust and accessible to different labs. To train our model, we are collecting labels using a technique called crowd labeling. Crowd labeling is a crowdsourcing approach for gathering labels from multiple volunteers or workers and estimating a group label that is more reliable than any individual label. Here's an example of a collection of user labels for this IC. The skill level of each labeler is unknown, but over time, the crowd labeling algorithm can learn each labeler's skill level or bias and use this to weigh their vote proportionally. Once the votes are tallied, the IC becomes classified, not as top secret info, just as an IC category. We are collecting crowdsourced label suggestions to provide training labels for a subset of independent components that will be used to train a neural network. After we train a neural network to recognize patterns in MoBI data, we can use this model to automatically classify brain, muscle, and other types of ICs. And we intend to eventually integrate this model into EEG Lab so it can be easily applied to any MoBI dataset. This is a work in progress that can't be completed without your help. Why help us? As I mentioned, the end result of this project will be an automated IC classifier integrated in EEG Lab for your use and benefit. And ultimately, this will save you time in your data analysis. There are 2 ways that you can help: by contributing your data and/or time. Developing this classifier requires a large amount of data and corresponding labels to yield the most successful outcome. Therefore, we are currently requesting to collect and use various mobile EEG datasets from different research groups and crowd labels from users like yourself, which can be done through our website at www.icmobi.org. I'm going to demonstrate this website to you, but first I want to acknowledge some of my collaborators. Julie Hahn, Marius Klug, Dr. Dan Ferris, and Dr. Klaus Gramann, as well as our funding sources from the NIH. I'd also like to give a shout out to the labs who already have contributed their data. We really appreciate your time, data, and contribution. So if you want to help us label components, head to our website at www.icmobi.org. And I recommend doing this on a computer instead of a phone. So here's our homepage. On the left-hand side, we have a couple drop-down menus. The overview has some info about background on this project and how and why to contribute. Below that, we have our tutorial section. So we assume that you are comfortable with basic concepts of EEG component analysis, but if you are not, we encourage you to read some of the background literature here. We have a section on how to differentiate components with some examples for each of the classes, and also a section on specifically how to label components on this website. If any of you have used IC Labels website for collecting crowdsourced labels, then it is very similar to that. So we also have a practice page where you can get the hang of how to label here. So each image shows several features from an independent component. We have the scalp topography here. Next to that, we have the IC's time series data. Here in the bottom left, we have the epic activity. Then we have the dipole position as projected on an MNI brain image. Next to that, we have the power spectral density. And then finally, we have the cross-frequency power coupling. I'm going to briefly touch on this feature just because many of you might not be as familiar with it. So this square matrix plot is a comodulogram that shows spectral covariance. Power-power coupling occurs when the amplitude of oscillatory activity in different frequencies covaries over time. This is calculated using an EEG lab plugin called PowPowCat. Authors Thamison and Miyakoshi in 2020 found that features of power-power coupling may be useful for distinguishing independent components. So, because cross-frequency power coupling may be a useful feature at distinguishing ICs, we decided to integrate this feature in IC MoBI. So after you spend some time evaluating the features, you're ready to label. You might notice that this component is towards the back of the head. We see bursts of high-frequency activity in the time series data. We also can see that the dipole position is pretty superficial near a lot of the neck muscle. And from the power spectral density, we can see high broadband power. And in the cross-frequency power coupling plot, we see an increase in the correlation coefficient in a broad range, all of which would be indicative of a muscle component. However, you do have the option to select more than one class if you do think it is in a mixture. Once you've made your decision, you can hit submit. And what will pop up is a window of what other users have labeled this component as. So we can see that this user called this component a little bit of muscle and heart activity. Hit close or X to close the window, and then hit the next button to move on to the next component. Once you feel comfortable with the platform and have had enough practice, you can continue on to the actual labeling section where your labels will be stored. In order to start labeling, you need to be logged in, and this is because we want to keep track of different users' performance in our crowd labeling algorithm. So to sign up, click on the icon in the top right-hand corner of the screen and select Sign Up. From here, you'll be able to enter in all of your information, or log in if you already have an account. Once you're logged in, you can begin labeling. So here we are in the labeling section where your labels actually count because we are signed in. So So after you've evaluated all the features, you might see, okay, based on the scalp topography, time series data, peaks in the power spectral density, and this increase in spectral covariance in the alpha and beta range, you might say, okay, this is likely to be a brain source. And you would hit submit, and you can click close or anywhere to move on to the next component. If there's a component that you're not quite sure about, feel free to hit the skip button. We also have a leaderboard at the top of the page. You can see how many components have been labeled overall on this website, as well as some personal stats. You can see your progress level based on how many components you've labeled, and also our leaderboard, just so we could have a little bit of friendly competition. Currently, Dr. Gramann sits at the top of our leaderboard with 142 components labeled. Next up is Phantom Gary from our lab, who has 61 components labeled. Congrats, Gary! So, if you guys don't want to be beaten by an inanimate object, get started labeling today. So our website is still under development, so we might still have some bugs. Bear with us. Unfortunately, I can't be there to answer questions in person, but if you do have any comments, questions, concerns, feedback, feel free to email me. We have our emails listed on the Contact Us section, so you can reach me at jacobsen.noelle@ufl.edu or at our project email, which is icmobiproject@gmail.com. Also, if you do have MoBI data that you are interested in contributing, please reach out to me via email. I would love to talk. Even if not 100% of the experiment is mobile, it still might be eligible for our inclusion criteria. So reach out to me. And with that, I'd like to thank you all so much for your time and attention. We really, really appreciate those of you who are providing data, feedback, labels, or otherwise contributing to this project. We wouldn't be able to do it without you. And we hope that IC MoBI will be a super cool, useful tool for you to use in your MoBI analyses in the future. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your workshop.
Thank you, Noelle, for giving us insights into this new exciting project. Thank you for taking your time. Sadly, Noelle couldn't be here with us live because a huge time difference. But any questions related to her talk, to the project that she's been presenting, can be addressed later in the general discussion at the end of today's sessions. So please don't hesitate to pose them. Now we are leaving for the lunch break, so enjoy the break, enjoy the lunch, and we are coming back live at 2 p.m. When we will talk a bit more about the specific EEG analysis approaches, so the connectivity between cortico-cortical sites and cortico-muscular sites, and also the time frequency analysis and gate-related spectral perturbations. See you at 2.